Hi, Carrie. Welcome to the Healing After Infant Loss YouTube channel. Thank you so much for coming on here today and for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. It's always an honor to talk about these kinds of things in my life.
Yeah, I think it's important that we, as women, share our stories of infant loss. If we start at the beginning, you said you started trying for a baby in 2014. Do you want to talk to me about that period of
hmm
your life? Like, how did you decide you wanted to try and have a baby? Did you always want to have children growing up? Do you want to talk to me about that period of life?
on my first date with my husband before we got married, I asked, "Do you want children?" Because that is a deal breaker for me. And he agreed. So it was like very upfront, very forward that I wanted children. And we got married in 2014 and we started right away.
Hmm.
I like to joke that it was fun until it wasn't
Yeah.
because we just the newlywed honeymoon phase, it's so dreamy and fun, but things like I wasn't getting pregnant. And everybody around me was, all of my friends were. I was, in my early 30s, and everybody had just gotten married, and we were in that stage of our life. And I watched almost every single one of my friends become a mother pretty easily.
Okay.
Some were like, "Oh, it's a surprise," and I I feel like for a while I was really happy to cheer them on, but and I remember like at every baby shower it was like, "Oh, you're next, you're next." And it was like, "Okay, I hope so." And that didn't happen. And so this went on for 5 years. We tried naturally because I refused to acknowledge that there was a problem. Like I was like, "Well, if everyone around me can do it, why can't I?"
Hmm.
Um and that was like around the fifth year, I realized that maybe there could be an issue, and that's when we decided to see a doctor.
Okay. So in 2018, you had your first miscarriage. Had you been to the doctors previously about, why aren't I getting pregnant? What's going on? Or how did that play
So
out?
in 2018, we became great candidates for IVF, and
Okay.
we jumped right in, and that's how I got pregnant the first time. And it was like, of course, like we're doing this very medical procedure, we're putting all this extra energy into it. Of course, I'm pregnant. Like it wasn't even surprising. And then we went in for the 8 week ultrasound, and there was no heartbeat. And that was devastating, but also we had more embryos. So it was like, okay, well, we'll just do it again. And so we only waited 1 month. Like the next cycle, I got pregnant again. And that's when I carried my daughter for 8 months, and I delivered her, or I should say, I developed a rare liver pregnancy disease called cholestasis of pregnancy. It's not very common, but there is medication for it, which I was on, and most people end up having healthy babies. Like the main sign is itching, which is a weird
Yeah.
symptom. Like I noticed it at first, and I was like, this doesn't seem crazy. Like I itch sometimes, and then I had a very severe case, even on the medication, and it ended up taking our daughter's life. And I delivered her in May 2019, and we named her Clementine, and that changed everything. Like that changed so many. It just changed everything because it was like we were there. We thought this was it. We had the baby shower, we had a nursery, everything was ready. And obviously it was like completely devastating, and we still had embryos. We still had two frozen embryos, and the doctors advised me never to be pregnant again because cholestasis of pregnancy almost always comes back in a normal case. And since my case was so severe, they were like, this, your body is not built for this. And so we worked with surrogates, which was such a wonderful, lovely experience because we had multiple women in our life show up and say, let's do this.
Oh, wow.
And it was that was such a gift. And I through that I reconnected with a friend that I had grown up with. She was my best friend in childhood, and like after high school we'd kind of drifted apart, but she followed me on social media, and I was sharing everything on Instagram, and she reached out and said I'd be interested, and we connected. And there's so much like testing and all of the things, and she passed with flying colors, so we moved forward with her, which was honestly like reconnecting with her was a huge joy that came out of this.
Wow, there's a lot of information.
Yes. No,
it's good, it's good. Just to circle back, so if we start at the first pregnancy, so that was through IVF, and you kind of thought, well,
correct.
of course I'm going to be pregnant. It's IVF, it's scientific and
Yeah.
everything else. How was that then when there was no heartbeat? Because that was obviously not really an expectation that you had. You
Correct.
thought it would be absolutely fine.
Yes.
How did you deal with those emotions?
Honestly, I was very much in like, well, we'll just start the next round. Like, I didn't really stop, to be honest. Like, I didn't do the grieving. I mean, I cried, but then I was like, let's get up and let's go. I was very much like, on to the next step. I feel like a big part of infertility for me was what's next. It was never what's now.
So then you went on and got pregnant again with Clementine. So throughout that pregnancy, you were obviously thinking, okay, everything's going to be amazing. Everything's fine. We're going to have a baby. Like you said, you had the baby shower, you had the nursery. Were you told, because I don't know anything about the ICP, did you know that could affect her life and that you were going to deliver her stillborn, or was that a complete surprise? Or how, like, I have no idea about any of this.
Sure. So, and I will say, like, through the first probably like 15, 20 weeks of that pregnancy, I was nervous. Like, I was like, ooh, it was very like, oh, right, this might not happen. Around 20 weeks, I started to show a lot more and have a lot more like pregnancy symptoms. And so I was like, okay, this is happening. And I started to really lean into that. And I was getting more excited, but I definitely still had a lot of fear, like in the back of my mind, which I think is very common for pregnancy after loss. And with ICP, we were diagnosed on a Friday. And by that next Wednesday, she had died. So I didn't have a lot of time to really like think about. I did obviously do research, right? You get some crazy diagnosis, you look it up. And it did say that stillbirth is possible, but I think it was something like less than 1% chance that it was going to happen. So I remember the doctor saying, don't worry, you're on the medication, it's fine. And I thought, okay, that's the vibe I'm going to follow. I'm not going to worry. And I'm pretty good at worrying. And I will say at that point, I was like, well, the doctor said not to, so I'm just not going to. I was very much like following the guidance of the people helping me. And the itching stopped. And so I just kind of assumed we were fine. So I didn't really have a lot of time to like go down the hole of what's going to happen. And I was teaching at the time. So like teaching during the day, like there's no time for me. So I didn't have like a lot of that spiraling time that I would normally get into. And then on a Wednesday morning, I woke up and I didn't feel her kicks like I normally felt. I could tell the schedule was off, and I called the nurse and they were like, come in immediately. And within about 30 minutes, because they like tried to check the heartbeat, but and they kept like bringing in different machines. And I remember thinking, well, the machine's broken. Like there's no way that you can't find my 8-month in utero heartbeat. And that's kind of when it happened. So I didn't get like a ton of time having the diagnosis, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then I don't know how much you want to talk about the actual stillbirth, how much detail you want to go into. That's kind of...
I love talking about her, so this is like a gift for me.
Okay. So do you want to share your experience? Did you deliver her vaginally? Did you get a C-section? Did you spend time with her afterwards? Do you want to talk to me about that whole process?
So I was induced on a Wednesday and I delivered her early Friday morning. So I was in labor for like 2.5 days, and I delivered her vaginally. That was like, they kind of said like, this is probably like the best way for your body kind of thing. And so I was open to that. I wasn't awake for a lot of it. I took every drug I could, honestly, to stop the pain and not feel it, which, you know, that was helpful in a lot of ways. But the staff was so wonderful. There was like these circulating nurses coming on staff, and they put like a little, I think it was like a little like a flower on the door. So I think that was like a signal to everybody of like what was happening. And it was hard because I was in the labor and delivery section of the hospital, so I could hear other babies being born, which was really hard. But you know, my husband never left my side. My mom came and we watched a lot of bad TV, and Then I delivered her, and we did get to hold her for a long time, which was wonderful. I remember, like, right before I delivered her, they kept asking, like, do you want to hold your baby? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know the answer. Like, I was like, I don't know how to answer this. And somebody probably asked me like every few hours, because I'm sure they were doing their paperwork, and and I just, there was one nurse in particular that I kind of just was like, what do I do? Like, can you tell me what to do? And she was like, I think you should hold your baby. Do you want pictures? And I was like, what should I do? And she said, I think you should get pictures. Which I'm so thankful that they pushed for that, because the second she was born, um, we didn't know if she was a boy or a girl.
Okay.
And we heard she's a girl. And I had dreams that she was a girl, but we had chose not to find out. So I was like, I knew it. And the nurse said, oh gosh, she's so tall. And I'm very tall. So I was like, she's just like me. And she looked like my husband. Like, she had my husband's nose, which I have a very strong nose. And so I was like, well, she got your nose. um, and then I remember another nurse came in and said, I'm going to take pictures. And if you don't want them, you don't have to have them. We will keep them here for you for a year. And I was like, I don't want them. But the next day, because I went home that day, the next day I sent my mom to go get them. And I'm so glad we got them. But you just don't, like, in the moment, you don't know. And like, all of these people had to come in. I remember they offered a chaplain, and I am more, what's the word, like agnostic. Like, I believe in something, but I don't follow like a specific religion. And my husband is an atheist. And during the time, I was very concerned about my husband. I had to have something I could fix or help or take care of. And that happened to be my husband. And I envisioned a chaplain like coming in and wearing like a priest outfit or something. And we declined, but I've recently learned that that's not what a chaplain is. Like, there's someone there to like just help you grieve, and it's not a godly situation, unless you want it to be. And I wish I would have known that. I think we would have asked for help in that moment, in that way, because I was just like, nope, we don't want a priest in here. That's not what's happening. Um, and I think learning that was like, oh, we would have benefited from that. But while in bed, I remember thinking, well, if we're not going to get a chaplain, I'm going to need help. And while I was still in the hospital bed, I reached out to a grief therapist for that Monday. So it was Friday, and I was like, we need help. And she was like, I will make space for you. So that we did get help with therapy, but I just knew we weren't supposed to do this alone. Like, this isn't something that we should just go home and go do. And then we decided to have her cremated, and I was unaware that most funeral homes, at least in our area, but I've heard it in a lot of areas, they offer free cremation for stillbirths, and they also offer free funerals. Like, it's a kind of tradition, which how would I know? How would I know that?
Yeah.
And we declined a funeral. I didn't know how to handle that at the moment. And so I said, I can't say yes to a funeral, but we wanted her cremated. So we have her ashes, and we still have them at home, and we talk to her a lot. We say goodnight to her every night. And then like the healing process kind of started. That was like because I remember when I went in that Wednesday, and they said, so you can go home and like rest at home and maybe change and come back tomorrow to be induced. And I knew I would not be going home until it was time to heal. Like I said, home is for healing, and I need to do this now, which I like that I did that. Just, I don't know where that came from, but I knew that when I got home, it was going to be like a different part of me. And I went home without my daughter. So it was in a different way. But yeah, so that's kind of how that happened.
This is usually a question I have to the end, but what do you think helped with your healing journey? Were there things
Mm.
that definitely did help and things that definitely didn't help?
I think one of the main things that helped with me is I was very open about it. I'm also a yapper, and I'll connect and chat with almost anybody. So that didn't change in this. One thing, I didn't like leaving the house, and the only time I would leave the house was to see our therapist, and she was like, okay, like you get to stay home for like a week, but then you have to start like taking a walk, because you could become an agoraphobic or something. And she's like, I don't think that's going to happen, but we just have to make sure that doesn't happen. But what I did do is I opened the doors and I put up on social media and had my friends call people saying, if you want to stop by and the door is open, you are welcome to come in and chat. And if the door's closed, we're not taking visitors. But I kept the door open almost all of the time. And the amount of people that showed up was wild. Like I don't know what I was expecting. And also, like, a lot of people I didn't expect to show up were like, you know, somebody I hadn't talked to in 7 years, but was like, I don't know, I'm here, I love you. And I was like, the openness was very helpful for me. And on the flip side of that, my husband did not respond the same way. And this was something that I felt was interesting for me because I thought, like, well, we're grieving, we're all supposed to like sit on the couch and cry. And I remember my husband, he would for a while, but then he loves a project. So he would go outside and he started repainting the house. And I remember like going out there being like, what are you doing? Why are you repainting the house? Like our daughter just died. And he was like, I don't want to be inside right now. And I was like, you're grieving wrong. You're doing this wrong.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't think I'm doing it wrong. I think I'm just doing it my way. And it's not a bad thing. It's just we're two different people experiencing the same trauma. And this is how I'm doing it. And I remember he was wearing headphones. And I was like, well, what are you listening to? Like, you're filling your brain with who knows what. You're not dealing with the problem. And he was like, I don't even have anything on my headphones. I just don't want to talk to people when they walk by me. And I was like, oh, okay. So you're okay. We're looking at this in a different way. And that was honestly a really nice way for us to bond because I got to see him in this different way. And so I think like for me, it was being very open, but also honoring and respecting my husband's process as well, which was not the same as mine.
Yeah, I relate to so much of your story. So my husband and I, we had a termination for medical reasons at 6 months. So a lot of this is similar. We,
Mm-hmm.
delivered stillborn essentially, had a funeral. We grieved in completely different ways. It's really, I think it's important that we share these stories because I think oftentimes you can think you're alone and like, I'm the only one who's ever experienced this. No one
Yes.
understands my pain, or like, my husband's doing it wrong. My husband was the same. He went back to work, and I was off work on maternity leave for about 4 months, and I was just at home crying for four
Yep.
months. And I was like, how can you just go and see friends and have a beer with your mates and watch football and like do these regular things? And I was just like a complete mess. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I think it's good that we talk about, the fact that people grieve differently and it's okay. And it's not, there's not one right or wrong way to grieve and to heal. So,
Yes. I think
yeah.
a lot about like if I don't know, I think about like growing up, my mom always said like if you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, it's okay. And I
Mm.
was thinking about that in that grieving process. Well, he's not hurting himself, even though for a while I was like, I feel like you're not dealing with this. But we were going to a grief counselor, so we were going to counseling and talking about it. But I remember one time saying, we're not on the same page. And my husband was like, Carrie, we are in different books. We're not even close to being on the same page. And I was like, like, that was terrible to me. And he was like, it's not a bad thing. Like, that doesn't mean
Mm.
we can't be happily married. And in my mind, we were going to do everything the same way, which is not realistic, but that's what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah. And can I ask, what did you do then with all the things from her baby shower and all the nursery things? Do
Mm.
you still have that set up, or did you take that down? Like, how's that whole
I was
process?
actually just writing about this yesterday because I love this question because it was so hard for me at first. Like I kept the door
Mm.
shut for like a month cuz I just couldn't look at it. But the room I'm in now was the nursery, but I turned it
Oh,
into my office. And
oh,
it's my favorite room in the house. It always has been since I've moved into this house, and I knew if we were going to have a baby this was going to be the room. But once that didn't happen, I didn't open the door for about a month. And then I started opening it and I would come in and I would sit and I would hold her ashes and I would just cry. And I did a lot of meditating in here. Um, and at the time we were still we were going to have more kids. So we kept the room and we worked with surrogates. But later, like about 1 or 2 years later, when it was clear that this was not happening, and I knew we had to do something with all this stuff, because then once like you make that decision, you're like, okay, well, this, for me, I was like, well, now I have to like get rid of this because I can't, it was just like a constant reminder. Um, and we found a young mother in need, like a teenage mom that was having a baby, and we donated everything to her. And I never met her, but she was a friend of a friend, and I said if I can give everything to her, and she was so grateful. But I was like, this needs to still have life, and I really wanted a lot of the things to kind of still live on in a way.
Did you keep anything for memory's sake, like any outfits or?
Um, I I'm sure I did. I had a whole library because I was a teacher, so I had like a whole library. So I saved a lot of the books.
Mm.
I don't think I kept any clothes. I might have kept, I think maybe like the pregnancy announcement was like IVF something. I think I kept that maybe somewhere. But I kept some of the decorations. Like I had like a gratitude avenue street sign that I had stolen from somewhere and I still have that. Like that's on our front porch. And a lot of the stuff had come from my classroom because I always had like I always had a bright and bubbly classroom. So, but I got rid of most of the things. Like there were a few things I kept, but not a ton.
Yeah. And then I saw that then in 2020 you got pregnant again
Mm-hmm.
and had a miscarriage. That's, I don't know how to word this question, so I apologize if it causes
Mm-hmm.
offense, but because you were told not to get pregnant again because of the ICP, what was the decision then to get pregnant again? Just because I
Um,
don't,
Yeah, yeah,
understand it
yeah.
all.
So initially, I'd only gotten pregnant through IVF. So my husband and I were not using protection,
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
then it was when our surrogate was also pregnant, and then I got pregnant, and it
Okay.
was like, oh wow, this I've heard of this happening. Um, and I had called my friend who was a nurse, and she was like, you should, probably see like a specialist, but people do this. You just have to be crazy monitored, and did not feel very good about it. Like I was like immediately so scared. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this again. And I did not want to go through what I'd gone through, especially like 2 years later.
Mm,
Um, but then I had a miscarriage and I was like, okay, well that's that. And then we started using protection because I was like, I can't do this. Like I can't have maybe that happening again. So it was very early on miscarriage, but that was a wild moment. I remember my husband being like, wow, we went from like 0 children to maybe having 2 at once, and that was not the plan, but whatever is, right? You don't know the plans.
And did you grieve that miscarriage, or was it more of a blessing in disguise? I know that sounds awful with infant
Nope.
loss.
No, that's a
Was
great
it?
question. I definitely felt like it was a blessing because
Yeah.
mentally I felt the like I don't know how stable I'm going to be through this. And that made me very nervous because I was still processing the grief and still not like I was like a stable person, but like it just immediately brought up all of those old feelings and it did not feel good. Like it did not feel like a good thing. And so I felt like it was a blessing. I've no one's ever asked me that. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah. I'm going to ask questions sometimes. I'm not sure if it's a good question or a bad question,
Yeah.
or too much or too little. So if you don't want to answer, just like, no, I'm not talking about that. But yeah, it's interesting because I think, again, this might be the wrong thing to say, but oftentimes with infant loss, it is always doom and gloom. Oh my God, it was the worst thing ever, which it is 100% for a lot of people. But there are times when it is a blessing in disguise, and it is, you know, that whole thing, what's meant to be will be. And, people say that with infant loss and get offended. And, there's so much you can say and can't say without upsetting people. So I'm trying my best
Oh no.
not to upset someone. But you don't often hear that a miscarriage was a blessing in disguise. So I think that's interesting
Uh-huh.
to hear that, because there must be other people who feel the same way. You're
Right.
not the
And I
only
mean,
one who's ever felt that. So
I pictured myself on so much medication, always hooked up to machines, and I was like, that doesn't sound what I wanted to be doing. So that didn't feel like an exciting moment. And I mean, we would have. I don't know what we would have done, to be honest, because I'm assuming we were planning on going through with it, but the
mm,
fear that came up did not feel good, like my last pregnancies that did feel good, but this one was like, what I just went through was so scary. I don't
yeah,
want to do that again.
yeah. I mean, no one's going to choose to go through a
Right.
stillbirth at 8 months twice,
Right.
so I completely understand that. I would love to know about the surrogacy journey because I don't think in the UK it's legal. Maybe I'm
Hmm.
completely wrong.
I've
I
heard
don't
that it's
know.
not. It's not
Yeah.
legal in many places.
Can you talk to me about that journey? Because I know, so you didn't go to like a surrogacy company, whatever. You kind of opened up to friends and family and people came
Mhm.
forward. How, I don't really know what my question is. I guess like the mindset of like, how did you feel about not carrying your own children? Because I know for me, that's like when I was going through my infant losses and thinking about the future, it was kind of like, okay, well, we could do IVF, we could do adoption, we could do surrogacy, da da da. And I think with surrogacy, one of the things is that like I want to feel pregnant, I want to give birth,
Mm-hmm.
I want to breastfeed, I want this to be my experience, I want to do the scans. Was it easy for you to think, I just want a baby, however it's going to come into the world, I don't care? Or did that play a part in your decision of like, oh no, I'm really missing a big part of this?
It did play a part, and I think your response is like a very common response. I
Mm.
was really happy to not have my body involved anymore.
Mm.
I felt very relieved because at that point it was 7 years of experiencing my body perform in a way that I did not like. And I was tired of being so upset with my body. Like I felt
Mm.
very disconnected from my body and I didn't like that feeling. And I'd worked so hard on like getting back to like loving my body. But I remember when the doctor said you should never be pregnant again, it was a relief. And I thought, okay, we have specific pathways ahead then that do not involve me. And that felt very good. And we had talked about like the breastfeeding situation, and I wanted to breastfeed and like maybe I would take hormones to do that. Or also our surrogate that we worked with was like I would share the milk. And so there were other ways around that. But it was definitely a relief, which I did not expect. That was a surprising feeling. Like I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
kind of was, yeah, I assumed I wanted to do it that way. And then we had maybe considered doing a like an agency or something, but so surrogacy is expensive. And one of our friends did like a GoFundMe and we raised a decent amount of money. And through that, because I was sharing it online, people were reaching out saying, well, do you have a surrogate? And it was like, no. And so we had 3 women step up and offer, and they'd started doing testing and things, and it didn't all work out. And then the one that we were lucky enough to work with was, I said that as before, a child friend that I grew up with. And so it felt very close and safe. Like I know her whole family, she knows my whole family. So it was like, it wasn't, and a lot of people said in the IVF clinic that this isn't always how it is. Like it's not such a like we're holding hands and crying together, and everyone says it's not always like that. So I think it was maybe a different experience than going through, well, obviously a different experience than going through an agency. But since I knew this person so well, it was a really lovely and sweet thing. And she was actually even willing to maybe do donor eggs after the second miscarriage that she had. And I knew I couldn't do it anymore. And I remember the day that we found out she was going to have a miscarriage, I was like, this is it. Like I think I'm done. I remember my husband was like, let's give it like 24 hours, like we're not making any rash decisions. And I was like, okay. And then the next day I was like, this is it. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
So just to clear things up in my mind, so with the
Mm-hmm.
surrogacy thing, you would go through an IVF clinic. So you still did the injections, you still did the egg retrieval, and then it was
Well,
fertilized by your husband's sperm, and then the 5 day whatever embryo was then implanted, or did they implant it straight away? Like, could you talk to me about that, like the scientific
yeah, yeah,
sort
yeah. I'll do
of
my
side of
best
things?
with the scientific parts. So I only did one egg retrieval, and in that
Okay,
egg retrieval, I got 4 eggs. So the first two
okay.
were my pregnancy, and then the second two were the surrogates we worked with pregnancy. So we already
Oh, this is
had,
the IVF from 2000.
yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay, okay.
yes,
I was
yes,
thinking
yes.
you have to do a new cycle thing.
I mean, we talked about it, but I was like, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that with my body anymore. So,
Yeah, because
we
it's a
had
lot.
tested, yeah, we had tested and done all that. So we had these, I don't remember what it was called, like grade A or something, very high quality embryos. And so, we just used that. And that was also like a nice boundary for me to be like, well, I'm not going to do IVF again. So we don't have any more eggs. It was
Mm.
like that helped me made that that helped me make that decision.
Yeah, because I think you can often get, talk to a lot of women about this sort of subject, and I think you can get caught in that, like, oh, we'll just do one more, or
Yeah.
just, keep going, keep going, keep going. And it gets to the point where you're just like, is it worth it? Is it worth putting your body and your finances and your relationship, and like, so there's so much to consider
Mm-hmm.
with doing this. It kind of gets to the point where you just think it's probably not worth it. So I think actually having done the IVF beforehand and only having those 4 to use is probably a good thing, because then you're like, okay, well, once we do this, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of puts a barrier in place. I think sometimes people push themselves too far almost.
Oh, I'm really good at that. So yeah.
Yeah.
And like I responded very well to IVF. Like I liked being on the hormones. I remember thinking that like, like the movies and videos where they're like crazy, she's on hormones. And I loved it. Like I felt so happy and I was bubbly and so even in that regards like I responded to it pretty well, but I just knew I was like it just changed everything. Everything was so controlled and timed and all of our calendars were color coded and that's not really how I work. And so I was like this is a lot, but it was for the baby and then it was like I don't want to do that again. So you're right, it was a very good boundary to have.
And then in terms of when she had the miscarriages, I guess again, I haven't experienced this myself.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
how was that, having a miscarriage where you're not physically feeling the symptoms? And then also you know, how did you support her, I guess, through the physical
Mm-hmm.
miscarriage? Because I guess you're kind of supporting each other, were you, through that
Mm-hmm.
process?
It was, I have chills even thinking about it because it was such an out of body experience, literally, but also such a heavy moment. Because there were even some points where I was like, oh my goodness, I'm dragging other people down into my grief
Mm.
hole. Like I felt like it was my fault. And she was so supportive and wonderful and positive, and she also has a very strong support system herself. She has I remember one of her sisters was doing the shots, and like I grew up with her sister, so we'd always be on the phone and chatting, so it definitely there was like a support system surrounding the both of us. But it was terrifying watching somebody I love go through something extremely painful that had to do with me. And
Mm.
she just kept saying, I want to give you this gift. I want to be able to do this for you. And she's always wanted to be a surrogate. And I've known that about her. So, like, that kind of helped. But it still was really difficult to watch. And, like, I needed a lot of therapy, I'll be honest. I was doing a lot of therapy at that time because I was like, how do I support her? And I would ask her that. And she would be like, it's okay. And I sent a lot of gift baskets and things like that. But I mean, I kind of had to really understand that it was out of my control. It was out of her control too, and
Yeah.
that we kind of just had to trust the process. And I think our relationship that we had behind us through. I mean, I met her when I was 5 years old. So, like, we had a
Mhm.
strong foundation. And even though we hadn't seen each other in a long time, those friends were like, you see them and it kind of just picks right back up. She's been like that for me. And so we've been through other really terrible things in our lives, and so it was like we've done hard things together before. We knew we could do it again. So I think having that foundation was really secure, made me feel very secure. I don't know what it would have been like if we didn't have that, but I felt very lucky to know that, like, I know your family is on board with this, I know my family's on board with this, like our families were talking to each other, like it was just this like kind of bubble of love, even
Mm.
in the grief of that. And everybody kind of stepped up when that happened.
Because it's an incredibly selfless thing for her to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot, like physically and emotionally, and
Yeah.
putting
And
your body through that.
she had
Even if it
never
had,
had a, she had never had a miscarriage before. And then she
yeah,
had two with me. And I was like, I can't believe I did that. Like, but she was like, you didn't. And so
yeah,
experiencing that was quite the journey, but also such like a beautiful one. Honestly, I don't know if I can say this like without, I don't know how to say it, but like it was one of my favorite parts just because
mm,
she and I have become close again because of that, and our worlds are
yeah,
entwined again. But didn't expect it to go that way. Like we were like, oh, we'll raise our kids together and it'll be that kind of thing, and all because you have to do like a psych evaluation.
uh-huh.
Um And part of that was like, will you tell the children? And I was like, well, I'm a very open and honest person, and I would be honored to tell my child that I wanted you so much that your auntie over here had to carry you. So we were very open about that kind of thing. And like, we were like, we'll go on family vacations together. And that's not really how it turned out.
Yeah. And then I saw that you looked into adoption. And again, this is something I haven't really looked into, so I'm going to have questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, you know, when people either struggle with infertility or have miscarriages, it's then like, oh, you can just do IVF or you can just adopt. And it's kind of, those two things are they're very often brought up as like an easy fix solution.
Correct.
And as we've kind of shown, IVF doesn't always work and adoption doesn't always work. Do you want to talk to me about, like, you know, the discussions you had with your husband and then deciding to go for it, and then what was that process like?
We looked into adoption before we even started IVF. Like, we signed up for foster care because I always was kind of interested in it. And we had a friend who worked in the foster care system, and so she kind of took us in and like gave us a few books to read. And through that initial meeting and reading, we decided that we wanted to try IVF first, but we were like on the list or whatever. I'm not super sure. And then after the surrogate had the second miscarriage, I looked back into it just to like see. And my therapist at the time was someone who also worked in the adoption process placement. I'm sure there's a better word for that, but she helped place kids with parents. And when I shared with her, which was so convenient because then I could just ask her all these questions in my therapy session. And you know, she kind of went through the process, and it's different in different areas. I think it might even be different in different states. I'm not super sure, but I know where we live, she said, you know, if you want to adopt, you will have a kid. And we weren't even set on a baby. We were like, we just, you know, we're exploring the idea. And she said, but it might be in 3 months or 10 years. And that made me very scared. I was like, well, that makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to, this is already 8 years, right? I was like, I don't know. And I remember my husband and I went to a couple therapy sessions together with her so he could ask questions too. And where we live, in the foster to adopt situation, you foster a child and the parents have a year to get things together to get their child back. And that was really unsettling to me in multiple ways because I knew I had just lost multiple babies. I didn't know how I was going to do it again. And then I also felt like, am I rooting for a parent to not have their child? And that made me feel very uncomfortable. And I didn't feel like I could do it. And it was a very hard conversation to have with our therapist, but she was like, you don't have to do this. Like, no one is making you do this. And if this is your gut feeling, you should sit with that for a while. And I did. And in the end, I was like, I don't think I can do it. And we have 2 couple friends that did that. And the one was a newborn and one was a toddler. And the parents thankfully got their life together and were able to take their child back. And it was like a death in the family to the adoptive parents. And so it was really like watching that, I was like, I don't know if I can go through that again. So with that, it became clear that this might not be the choice for me. And I do know some people that have adopted successfully, but they have also shared that it is not for the faint of heart and it is not something simple. And there's so many things to consider. And the more I learn about it, the more I think I made the right decision for my husband and I, or we made the right decision.
Yeah. It's such a huge decision as well because I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm just going to shut up. But
yeah.
Zip that. But yeah, I think it is a big decision, and it's potentially a bigger decision than trying to have your own children.
Mm-hmm. I think so. There was so much more paperwork and, you know, people coming to check to see if your house is okay. Nobody does that if you're pregnant. Like nobody, you know, like, so yeah. And we were so open to it. And I feel like for a while when I was a teacher, I saw a lot of kids in the foster care system, and I saw like their lives be affected by this. And I, like, of course we would have provided a good safe space, but I didn't feel like I was in a place to do that because I was still in such deep grief from our previous losses that I was like, I don't know if this is going to be the right choice for me or a child in this situation.
Yeah. And it's one of those, I mean, you know, if you look after a child for a year and then they get taken away from you, like you said, it is a death in the family. And, you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing that these parents get it together and they get their child back. But also, you're the one left, you know, heartbroken, and you've got another infant loss essentially. Even though the child is fine,
Yes.
you know, you're still not the parent. So, yeah, I understand the kind of emotional toll behind making that decision, and kind of, do I want to put myself potentially through that? Potentially, it could be
Mm-hmm.
okay, but also maybe not. Like, it's kind of, I think people think, you know, IVF and adoption is like, just do IVF or adoption and you'll definitely get a child, whereas it's not. It's not that easy. It doesn't always work, and I think it's important to sort of share these stories of, like, you know, the realities behind making these really tough decisions, because it's clear that you wanted a child. You know, you tried lots of different ways and lots of different routes, and, you know, and sometimes it just doesn't happen, and that's just the way life is, unfortunately. And you've kind of got to do the best with whatever you're given. But
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting, like, because some people are like, well, why didn't you try donor eggs or other something else? And it's like, there's just sometimes when you know that it's not for you. That's how we felt with adoption. And I don't think that every pathway is for everyone. Like, I know some people that didn't try IVF because, like, we just didn't want to do it. That is, I think, also like a gift of knowing yourself, of like, I don't want to push myself that much because it's intense. And I think
yeah,
having those kind of boundaries with yourself is great. Also, my husband joked that, like, we would have these boundaries and then we would meet them and we would be like, just kidding, we're not doing that, because we didn't want to do IVF. We're like, we will never do IVF. And
yeah,
then it came to that point where I was like, well, we should do it. And I was like, okay, we put this boundary up, but then we just threw it out the window because you never know until you're in the situation.
yeah. I think, like, no one, well, I don't know, not many people, I would say, choose, like, actively think, I'm definitely going to do IVF. That sounds so fun.
Right.
That sounds like the best way to make a baby. Like, you know, it's not, yeah, it's not everyone's first priority. But so then you stopped trying in 2021. What was that decision like for you? Because I spoke to somebody recently, Alice, where we're both kind of in between. Like, I've not been pregnant since 2020. I'm not trying to get pregnant, but I've also not closed the door, never. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in that grey area. How did you make that
Mm-hmm.
decision to be like, that's it, no more, not doing it? Decision made.
I think for me, I just knew, like, I knew it in my bones. Um, I'm often a very decisive person, and the day that our surrogate had the second miscarriage, I was like, well, that's it. And I just knew it. And I remember coming home and telling my husband, and he was like, maybe, we've, like I just said, we put these boundaries up and we often just kind of go through them. And so he was like, I think we should wait 24 hours. And I was like, fine. And we woke up the next morning and I was like, I still feel the same way. And he was like, okay, I think I was just really tired of being so sad. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody around me knew it. Like, it wasn't this, like, it wasn't like I was hiding it well. Like, my husband was very aware. And I had developed a lot of anxiety. And I was like, I need something to change. And I felt like I changed all these other things in my life besides stopping trying to have a child. And I was like, I got to try this and see how it feels. And when we decided to stop, I felt so good. Like, the relief that came over me was not something I expected. And I couldn't deny it, to where I was like, okay, I have to lean into this because this is what's feeling good. And it's kind of that one major decision has kind of affected all of these other ways I make decisions. Cause I'm like, well, I mean, sometimes we don't know, but if something feels good, I'm like, well, I'm going to lean into that, because I feel like before I was just like, well, I'm just on this, path of having a parent. I don't care what it feels like to get there. But now that I am multiple years out of that, I can kind of see, how did my body feel? How did I feel thinking about that? And when it was a relief, that's when I was like, well, this is clear. Something clearly is here, because I haven't felt this good in almost a decade, and I need to feel more of that. So that's kind of how that came out of.
Yeah. Um, I'm going to quote you because one of your reels that I saw, I reshared it because I thought it was brilliant. You were talking about, your story. You said, I have a sad story. I do not have a sad life. And so I'd now like to talk about how your life changed when you decided to stop trying and when I think you quit your job, you followed your dream to become a writer,
Mm-hmm.
you're deciding to be happy. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that might be triggering to people who have recently gone through infant loss. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have been triggered by that as well. But I think I'm also at that stage in life where I'm like, I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be worrying about pregnancy tests. I don't want to be thinking about IVF and the finances. And like, yeah, I just think you captured that so well. I have a sad story, but I do not have a sad life. And I think that's just incredible. So could you talk to me about how life has changed and what you're doing to live a good life?
Mm-hmm. I think I felt like a sad story. Like I felt like obviously this is a very sad situation, but I didn't want the pity. I don't
Yeah,
like
the
the
pity is the
pity.
worst.
It's the
Yeah,
worst. Like
yeah.
I would get so upset. Like I remember when I went back to teaching and people's faces would be like, "How are you?" And it was just like that
Oh,
and I'm
I
like,
hate it.
yeah, it
Yeah,
was like, "I'm terrible. Like you know how I am."
yeah, yeah.
And I kind of I go against the grain a lot in my life. And I felt like when I started getting that, I was like, I'm not going to be sad. And
Mm.
two, like maybe falling to one side of this a bit too much, I was like, well, I'm going to do all these things that make me happy. And I kind of tried to lean heavily into that, which also became a slippery slope because I was like, I'm going to do all these things. And I kind of wasn't really dealing with what I needed to deal
Yeah.
with. But
I'll just distract myself instead.
yeah,
That'll be absolutely fine.
you watch me, I'll be happy. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but kind of like what I was saying before of like when I made the decision to stop and it felt good. Cause even when I started like trying all these new things, they didn't feel as good because I still was like chasing something.
Yeah.
And I really started to just lean into what do I already have in my life and what feels good in that.
Hmm.
And then that's kind of why I was like, oh, I can be happy with my morning cup of coffee on the patio and taking my dog for a walk. Like mornings are my favorite. And I thought I had to fill motherhood with like this big thing. And I mean, I did quit my job. But I also just realized that I didn't want to be in a job that was making me question it. Like I was like, life is too short for me to be feeling this way. I'm quitting my job. And I quit teaching mid school year, which is not super chill, but um my mom was re-diagnosed with cancer, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and I was like, I don't want to be here. I want to be with my family, I want to be with my friends. I can't do this anymore. And um once I started to really lean into things that started to make me feel good, I was like, oh, I actually have like this lovely life. And I started getting paid for my writing and I became a freelance writer. And I never thought I could do that. And I think once it was like, well, if I can't have motherhood, like what's another dream that I can have? And through that grief, I got to like really get curious about the things that I've always wanted to do. Who do I want to be? How do I want to feel? And so I started exploring art and reading and writing and cooking and traveling and like these other things that I don't think would have been as easy if I were a mother. And it was like, well, I have this time to do this. So I'm going to lean into it. And like, we joke that I'm going back to school to get my MFA in writing. And we're like, this was our child's college money that we're spending right now. Like, but why not? Like, why not
Yeah.
be able to use that? Because this is something that I want to do. And it's making me feel really good. And I think that's kind of the like gauge I've been on of like what makes me feel happy. And I will say, probably the first 3 years after Clementine died, I didn't have this gauge. Like I was still doing things that made me feel good, but I don't think I had enough space from it. And I don't want to say that time heals because I still am on my knees crying years later. But I was able to get, like I said, curious about what makes me feel good. And, but I was really angry for a lot of those years. Like someone was like, if I saw a baby, I'd be like, I don't want to be in this room. Like I had a very of course, visceral response. And so it did not come lightly. A lot of therapy. Therapy was one of the big ones for me. A lot of therapy, but then also just like looking at to the like really small things. Cause I kept coming like, I got to go back to the basics. Like, because when I first quit my job, I didn't start, I didn't start getting paid to write for a few more years. But I was like, I got to come back to like, what is my foundation that makes me happy? And my home and my yard is a really big thing. And so we just started doing home projects and making the backyard like a sanctuary that I always like to be in. And it was like, let's just start at these like small basic steps. And with that, it almost like reminded me that I could do something and it could make me happy, and it could be like I could start work on something and then finish it, because I had kind of forgotten what it felt like to finish something. And so like that idea of doing something in that way really reminded me that you can be happy with making a pie or something. And I don't want to say like pie and motherhood are the same thing, but it's obviously bigger than that.
I think I saw on one of your Instagrams that like, you it's I don't remember your exact words, but it was something along the lines of, you're placing your happiness on becoming a mother. And I think I was very much the same. I grew up thinking, I'm going to be a mum. My life's purpose is to be a mum. I don't want a career. I don't care about jobs. Make money until I'm a stay-at-home mum. Like that was always just what it was. And when you put so much of your happiness in something that doesn't happen, it's then, yeah, we had that kind of similar experience to you, where after the termination for medical reasons, my husband and I were like, okay, well, we lost 2 pregnancies after that, but still, it kind of changed our life. And we were like, we need to be happy. Like we can choose to be happy.
Yes.
Do I enjoy my job? No, let's not do that. Do we want to travel? Yes. Okay, well, let's do that. Like, and I think people can get stuck in the system and stuck in the hamster wheel of life without realizing I'm not actually that happy with what I'm doing. Kids or not, that's kind of irrelevant, but just in general. And I think when you go through something as traumatic as losing a child in such a way, you then, you really want to make the most of life. Like you said, life is short and life is for living. And like, I want to be happy. I want to choose to be happy. And even if it is enjoying your morning coffee, taking your dog for a walk, making a pie, like there can be so much joy and happiness in the small things in life. And I think a lot of people can just be in the hamster wheel of life and not enjoy the small things. And I think it takes, unfortunately, it sometimes takes something so dramatic like this to realize and just think, oh my God, life is so precious. Life is so short. I'm so lucky to be here. What can I do today to make it incredible, or to make it the best I can do, or just to be happy? And yeah, so I resonate so much with your story, because I think I'm very similar in a lot of it. So yeah, I love that you find joy in the small things.
I didn't at first, but I like how you said like the people can get stuck, because I was like, I refuse to be sad. Like I was a very happy person prior to infertility. I was a super happy person, and I was happy during it, but I started to just drop. Like my mood was just, and then it was like, well, I want to be that person again. Like, and I kept thinking a lot about like little Carrie and old Carrie. Like little Carrie wants to wear Doc Martens and listen to grunge 90s rock. So, I mean, let me try that and see what feels good. And also like 80-year-old Carrie is going to want to look back on her life and think, gosh, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I didn't just stay sad all the time, because I do think that like, obviously that sadness is such a valid part of it. And you can't just skip that part. Like that's not I mean, you might be able to, but it's going to come up in other ways. And I think doing so much like self work to see like, well, what does really make me happy? Is my job making me happy? It wasn't. It was actually something that I kind of dreaded for a while. I loved the students, but all of the other parts of it, I was like, this is not working for me. And it was like, well, then why should you don't have to be here. Like no one is making you be here. And I think that was a big part of like, because when I was a little kid, I didn't like think, oh, I'm only going to be a mother, but I just assumed I would be a mom. Like it was like, well, that's what everybody does. My mom did it. All my friends' moms did it. My friends all started to do it. And so it was like, oh, that's just like the life assumption. And then when that didn't happen, it was like, well, now what do I do?
Yeah.
I didn't have a backup plan.
Yeah. it's interesting when you're in that thing where, like, you know, it is. I was talking to Alice about this as well. How it's so assumed that you're gonna have children. Like, you get married, you have children, you live life, and that's just what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you realize, well, actually, that's probably not going to happen. Well, then, well, now what do I want to do? What, you know, do, like, and like I said about having, you know, your 80-year-old self looking back. Well, okay, do I want to stay in a job that I hate? Do I want to not be friends with people who I don't really like? And do I
Yeah.
want to, you know, do these things? Well, not really. I kind of want to, you know, if I can't live the life that, you know, was plan A, well, okay, well, what's plan B? And I think me saying this as well is also after, you know, being out of that whole thing for a couple of years. And I, you know, you said time
Mm-hmm.
doesn't heal, but I think for me it sort of does. I think the longer time goes on, the better I feel about the whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, so I've forgotten what my point was, but yeah.
Well, and it's funny because like I assumed not having children would be my nightmare. Like I used to
Yeah.
literally use that word of like, well, that will never happen to me. I'm going to do whatever I can to have a kid. And like that was the like motto. That's how I spoke to myself. I'm going to do whatever I can. And I remember after Clementine died and we were still, you know, trying and I was teaching and my motto was, I can do hard things. I can do hard things. I bought the sticker. I had it hanging up in my classroom. I said it all the time. I can do hard things.
That's literally one of my mottos in life.
And I remember one of my coworkers was like, of course you can do hard things, but you don't need to do them forever. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
what? I never thought of that.
I can, but I don't have to. I don't have to have a hard life.
Yes. Because I remember I was like, she was like, well, what's going on? I was like, well, we're doing this and we're doing that. I can do hard things. And she was like, obviously. But, and I just, no one had ever said that to me before. And I remember like, I still think about that moment when I walked away of like, oh, okay. And I mean, I still kept trying for another year or so, but that never left me of like, well, you don't have to live a hard life. Like, and I think because I was so like laser focused on becoming a parent and I refused to like look away, it was like, oh, there are other ways to do this. I also think a big part of that is I didn't have a lot of role models like that in my life. Like most women in my life had children, and the older ones who didn't have children were like, I mean, they were great, but they also were like, oh, she's angry, or oh, you know, she doesn't
Yeah.
have anybody. And so it was like, well, I can't be that person. I don't want to be the old, angry, but lonely woman. Like, that's what I
Yeah.
thought was going to happen.
I actually think that social media is an incredible thing for this because I think, you know, I found you and there's a lot of other women who are childless not by choice, child free after infertility, child free just in general. Like there's lots of different terms and people fall under different
Mm-hmm.
brackets. But I think, like you said, back in the day when we were growing up, if somebody didn't have children, it was like, oh my god, poor them.
Yeah.
You know, how sad, they must live such a sad life. Or it was like, oh, what's wrong with them? Or oh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, didn't she find someone? Or I don't know. There was always such a negative connotation to it. And I think these days having people like yourself and other people talking about infant loss in general, but also life after infant loss, I think it's incredible that you can show that you can be happy. You don't have to be that sad old woman who didn't have
Mm-hmm.
kids and had an awful life and oh my god, poor her. It can be like, yeah, that was really shit, you know, poor me for what I went through, but also I'm okay and I'm not, you know, this sad old lady that you have to feel sorry for. Like, I'm
Yeah.
thriving, like I'm okay.
Yes. And I think like I said, I didn't see a lot of people with this, but now a lot of older women will talk to me, like women in their 80s, and be like, I lost two babies, you know, and no one ever talked to me about it, or they didn't even let me hold my baby, and no one ever brought this up. And I remember one lady was like, I've never seen anyone talk about it the way you do. And I thought, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just talking. I'm just telling you how I feel. And she was like, no one would be okay with this conversation when I was your age. And I think that that is very telling, obviously, but also like, I feel very lucky to be able to say and have space to say that right now, because so many people experience this and it's not talked about a lot. And I don't like, I remember somebody has also said to me, like, I've never thought of grieving like you grieve. I don't, like I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just showing up and trying to do what feels good. And, You know, we have sad days. We call them Clementine days, where it's like, we're just going to focus
Oh.
on Clementine today. And they, I think, are necessary. I think they allow space for the good days, but they're hard. They're hard to get through.
Yeah. I think that's important to share as well. I think, you know, sometimes when people have been through infant loss and then come out the other end, so to say, you know, we're talking about like traveling and quitting your job and all these wonderful things, but actually we still do have hard days. There are still days where we cry. There's still days where we think, oh shit, you know, I really did want to be a mum, or like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, well, you know, Christmas is kind of shit because we don't have kids running around.
Christmas morning is really tough for me. Like, it's been that's
Yeah.
always the hardest one.
Yeah. Or even like Halloween when everyone's out, you know, buying kids costumes and putting cute pictures online of their baby in a pumpkin, and you're just like, that's so cute. Like, I want to do that, but I
Yes.
can't. It's not going to happen. Like, there are, you know, I think there's a lot of things that we miss out on, you know, having not had children and that being something we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think, you know, I think it's kind of important to embrace both, or to acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
both, at least, to
I
say,
think
you know,
so.
there are really good days, but there's also really shit days where actually we did want a different outcome. We're kind of making
Mm-hmm.
the best out of a bad situation, but yeah, I think it's, you know, it's important to talk about both sides of you know,
And I think
infant
a
loss.
lot of people feel that with or without children. Like, you know, I think so many of us let go of some sort of life that we wanted. And
Yeah,
mine happens to be motherhood. And so it's like, but there is that like common universal grief that is there of like, not everybody gets what we wanted. I know that like I've idolized mothers a lot, and I will talk about that. And a lot of mothers have reached out being like, do you think we're being celebrated? And I'm like, oh, I guess it's not you being celebrated, it's your children, and you're celebrating your children. And that's what I wanted to have my baby dressed up as a pumpkin. But I think it is also important to acknowledge that like the moms aren't being celebrated, and they're probably doing the work to create the celebration, but I wanted to do that work.
yeah, yeah. Um, I have 4 questions that I ask at the end of the episodes. One of them you've kind of answered, so I'll ask it anyway. But
Yeah.
the first one is, what do you want other women experiencing infant loss to know? Do you have any kind of advice or tips or
I
anything
think
to
one
help
of
you?
the main thing is that like we're not alone in this, because as we mentioned earlier, like it's so isolating. And as long as you aren't hurting yourself or anybody else, the way that you grieve is the way that it should be done. There's no like right or wrong way to do it. Grief is weird, and it's
Yeah.
not supposed to be chill.
Grief is weird. I think that's
I
the clip.
mean,
That's the
it
title of the video.
is.
Grief is weird.
I met somebody recently and she was like, well, I don't know how to grieve. And I was like, I don't either. Like, it is so uncomfortable and like it comes up in weird ways, but like that's part of it. And I do feel like if people haven't dealt with grief, they will. Like, it's coming and it sucks.
Yeah, I think that's something that I need to work on, because I was, um, especially after the termination for medical reasons, I was like depressed for 8 months, but didn't
Yeah.
seek therapy or anything, and then moved from France to Miami, and I was
Oh,
like
wow.
doing that, traveling, all the rest of it, and I only started therapy recently, which is actually the first time I'm talking about it. But like, I started therapy recently with my husband, and one of the things I want to talk about is the infant losses, and I do think that's going to be a fucking shit show because I just avoided it.
Totes. Yep, for sure.
So I'm about to go headfirst into the shitstorm. So wish me
Yes.
luck, please.
Good luck. I mean, it is so messy, but I often looked at it, it was a way for me to honor the babies that I had, of like, I want to make sure that the space I'm holding you in is healthy because you matter, and I want to make sure that I am in a stable space to hold that for you, if that makes sense.
It does, because I like, this is going to turn into a therapy session itself, but I
I'm
I
here
like
for it.
but I literally don't think about my losses that often, and especially because I had 3 miscarriages and then the
Mhm.
termination at 6.5 months. And you know, even around that time of year, like my brain just completely switches it off. I just don't even think about it. I don't say his
Mhm.
name. I don't often talk
Mhm.
about him. Like I just kind of completely block any of that from me. So I need to talk about that in therapy. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's, I would like to be in a space where like I do honor him, and like maybe his birthday I do something, or Christmases I do something, or I
Mhm.
don't know, like I see people online who like will, you know, buy a Christmas present every year for the baby that died. And I'm like, I don't even think about him, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds awful to say, but I think it is
I
just
think
me like
I think
pain.
that's a super valid response. Like, we're built to protect ourselves,
Yeah.
and it's like you said, it's a shit show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It really is. Yeah.
and just like something, and obviously take this what you will. Obviously, I'm not a licensed person in general. Um, I don't often like on Clementine, we call it Intergalactic Clementine's Death Day, because my
Okay.
husband likes to say he wants to invite the whole galaxy to celebrate. I
Oh.
do things for me though. Like, I don't buy
Mm.
things for Clementine. That's not something I do. I get a massage. I buy a new dress. I get my favorite meal. And it's just because that's what makes me feel good. And maybe like buying an outfit or a toy would make somebody feel good. Or like sometimes we'll donate a gift in like her honor. But, and I don't want to sound like too self-centered about this, but I kind of make it about me and
Mhm.
what I feel good. And that because I like, even when I have to write like a new chapter, I give myself treats. Like, I have to like put treats along the way for me to be like, okay, well, well, if I write for 2 hours, I get to have some gummy nerds or something. And often when I deal with like really heavy shitty feelings, I reward myself for it because I deserve it. It's a shit show.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna have to start rewarding myself after therapy. Like I'll do therapy and then I'm
Yes.
allowed a chocolate bar because I just
Oh,
dealt with that shit and it's yeah.
yes. I just bought a new shirt because I had a really hard conversation the other day with somebody that I didn't want to have. And I was like, I'm going to go buy myself a shirt. Retail therapy. I mean, I know this isn't like good advice, but it's what I do.
I love the honesty though. I love the honesty. I think people can sometimes be too like perfect and no one's perfect. I love the reality of like if I feel shit I'll buy myself, you know, sweets or clothes or
Yeah, I'm
something.
very
But
into clothes right now. So, yes.
yeah, I love that. Okay, question number 2 is what do you wish society knew about infant loss?
Oh, um, I think that it never really leaves you, at least for me. It doesn't ever really leave me. And it's not like I think about it every day, but it comes up. And I mean, I think some people know that, but I had to do like a lot of what's it called, like when you do the therapy of like doing the thing you don't want to do, immersion therapy or something like that. I forget.
Okay.
But like, I love TV. I love movies. I love sitting on the couch for hours and watching TV with my husband. It's like, I love it. There are a lot of birthing scenes in shows and
Yes.
movies, and for a long time I would burst into tears, have to stop, leave the room. I couldn't handle it. And so, exposure therapy, that's what's called, exposure therapy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And I worked with my therapist of like watching specific exposure therapy scenes, writing what I felt, and it still was happening. And I remember taking this to my therapist and being like, so I've done all the things you've told me to do and I'm still having a meltdown. And she was like, then I think we should stop. And I was like, but it's not fixed. And she was like, it might never be fixed. And I think having that mentality of uh, it's never going to be okay,
Mhm.
um, is something that I've really learned to live with. And now a lot of times I just mute it when there's a birthing scene, or I skip it, or sometimes I can sit through it. I almost always cry. And I think knowing that that's going to happen allows it. And I was at a friend's house the other night and we watched Knocked Up, which I love that movie, but I mean, she gets knocked up. Like, it's the whole point of the movie. I've seen it.
It's in
And
the name.
it's in the name.
Name gave it away.
And I loved it until she gave birth. And I like ugly cried. I remember like kind of opening my eyes and everyone was just kind of looking at me and I was like, I'm okay. Like, we can keep going. And they were like, are you sure? And I'm like, that what just happened like needed to happen.
Mhm.
And can we all move on from this? I'd like to move forward. And
Yeah.
kind of knowing that that might always be like that is okay, or like knowing that it's always going to feel unfair, just like that, knowing that I don't think that there's like an end date to this. I'm gonna probably be grieving forever, and I think grief is that way in general, but um I don't know, sometimes it comes up in weird places, and with I think the right people, they don't care. Like, my girlfriends were like, okay, well, we're gonna continue pressing play. And I'm like,
Oh, I
cool.
know what happens at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still here. I'm not gonna leave. Might go get some more candy, but I'm okay. And like the grief doesn't ever stop. And I think a lot of people with grief know that, but there's some people that don't have grief, that it's like the reminder of like it doesn't really ever go away. Like it's gonna be there and it's gonna suck.
I think the TV thing though, and the film thing, like
Mm-hmm.
I wish they would put somewhere in the title. I spoke to my husband about this, like, you know, this film contains a birth, this film contains an abortion, this film contains
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like breastfeeding. But then my husband was like, yeah, but you can't do that for every single, like, it contains a stabbing, it contains a shooting,
Right,
it contains a
right.
rape, it contains, like, you can't give away the whole story of the film, but like, you know,
I've had this same conversation and my husband has had the same response of like, but then that's
yeah.
telling the whole story.
But I think it can be so triggering. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I was with a friend and we decided to put on a film. I can't remember the film title, but it's the one that came out about 2 years ago, 2, 3 years ago, about a woman who was a girl who was raped at high school or something. I don't remember the film, but like we put it on just thinking, oh, I've seen everyone talking about this, we'll put it on. My friend is a rape victim survivor. I don't know which term is used these
Mm-hmm.
days. And I had no idea that was what the film was about. So I just suggested, because everyone talked about it, we put it on. And I was literally just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I was crying my eyes out. And I think she was just like, no, it's fine. Just keep watching it. I'm fine. I'm fine. But I just felt so horrendous. But like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
films like Knocked Up Fine, you might think there's going to be a pregnancy and a birth. But there's other films and TV shows where you're watching it and it can just come out of nowhere that, oh, the next door neighbor just gave birth on the driveway, and it's not part of the story, but it just happens. And
Yes.
it throws you completely off guard. And you're just expected to get on with it. And like, you know, breastfeeding is one of them, crying babies is another one, or like
Crying babies,
there's
yes.
so many things that come up. And I think we could at least have some sort, I think, for the main topics, like, okay, a stabbing, a shooting, rape, birth, like the top 5 or the top 10, can we at least know that's going to happen? Because then I'd be more mentally prepared
Yeah.
versus like you're trying to relax and chill and then it's like, oh my God, oh okay, someone's giving birth and oh that happened. And
I'm always so thankful of like if the pregnant woman, if they don't show the birthing scene and then there's just like a baby there, I'm like, oh thank God. Like I don't,
yeah,
but I don't know. I feel like sometimes that is also like a slippery slope of like kind of like your husband was saying of like, well, they're gonna have to
yeah,
like list everything. And
yeah.
but it comes in out of nowhere. I mean, like the grocery store is a really big trigger for me, which I
Mm.
think is actually, I've read that it's kind of common, but there's a grocery store that like it's on the corner of our street and they saw me like be pregnant and they were very like, oh my, I went in
Mm.
there every other day. I would walk there. And then after, like, these people saw me and nobody asked, but like, I didn't have a baby anymore. And it became this like really intense place where I would just cry in the grocery store. And I remember my husband was like, well, are you never going to go to the grocery store again? And I was like, I'm considering it. Like it's
Yeah,
becoming an issue. But the more like I pushed myself, I'm getting better. But also like sometimes I still do, even years later. And I think allowing myself the grace of like, your baby died, you can cry kind of whenever you want. And because like if I were to tell my best friend that, she would be like, I would be like, you can cry whenever you want. So I'm like, okay, tell you, I need to tell myself that instead of
yeah.
holding myself to this like crazy grief standard of I'm perfect all the time, because that is not real. And I think the grace part is hard because it's not pretty. Like it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's weird that I'm by myself crying in the grocery store. That's a weird thing to see.
It's kind of normal though also. Like
Yes, for
people
sure.
cry, like people cry. And
People
people, you know,
cry.
people usually cry at home, but also people cry when they're sad. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the more we can normalize that as well, I think we should actually all just go to the grocery store and cry and make it normal. Like,
I would
hi guys, I have
sign up for
emotions.
that.
Like, yeah. We'll have like one day of the year, everyone goes to the grocery store and cries. But actually, speaking of grocery stores, I still avoid the baby aisle. Like, I
Oh,
will walk up the
mm-hmm.
alcohol, the chocolate, the biscuits, like whatever, to get to the tills or go whatever. I will avoid that aisle, like unless I have to,
Mm-hmm. It's
which you don't
interesting.
often have to, but I will just avoid it.
I th- um I don't do that anymore, but my husband does. And recently
Mm.
we were in the store and I was like, we were late and I was just like cutting through the store. And we happened to go through the baby section, and my husband was like, "Why are we here?" And I was like, "I don't, why are we where?" And I didn't even
Yeah.
notice it. And he was
Yeah.
like, "I don't want to be here." And I was like, "Oh, yep, I didn't even notice it." And it's interesting to see how we both, like, we're on the same timeline ish, like we experience it at the same time, but we're seeing it through different lenses. And I think it's really common. Like, I still don't go to baby showers. Like, I want to be invited. I
Hmm.
will send a gift. Please let me make the choice. I'm probably not going to go, but I still want to be included. But I'm not going. Like,
Yeah. That's far too much.
it's way too much. Like, I'm not interested in. Like, even one of my friends was like, "What if I?" Because she doesn't have children. She's like, "What if I have children?" And I was like, "I'm probably not coming. Like, I'm going to be very honest. And you're my person, but that's just. It's not about you at that moment. It's about me." And a lot of people, I get a lot of pushback on that specifically online of,
Mm.
"Oh, you're not showing up for your friends." And it's like, but I'm not supposed to push myself down to show up for somebody else. That's not how that kind of relationship is supposed to work. And it's not like my friends are like, "Why aren't you here?" It's like, we all have to do what we can to be able to show up in general.
Yeah. You have to protect yourself,
Yes.
however
Yes.
that looks.
Yes.
The next one. So we asked this earlier, but maybe you'll have different answers now that we've been speaking a bit more. What helped and what didn't help with your healing journey?
I think, like, being open helped. What didn't help? Um, I think people trying to fix it, like
Mm.
it was God's way or God needed an angel. And granted, like I said, I'm not religious, so that might be a part of that, but also
Yeah.
like, "Oh, well, you can, just adopt, or you can do something else." I think the trying to fix part was really not helpful. And the people that just showed up and said, "I don't know what to say," or "I don't know what to do," that helped so much more than people thought. Because I even had one friend that was like, "I didn't know what to say, so I didn't show up." And I said, "Well, that what you said right now is all I needed, because I don't know what to say either. I don't know how to do this."
Yeah.
um but the trying to fix, which I think is a common response, like, people don't want you to feel bad, but there's no fixing this. Like, this isn't something that can be fixed. And so acknowledging that was huge for me and made me feel a lot closer to people, because it was like, "Cool, you don't know what you're doing either. Me neither. Let's not know how to do this together," instead of someone being like, "This is how you do it." 'Cause I was like, I don't think that's how you do it, because there isn't
Yeah.
really a way to do it.
No one knows.
Yes.
Literally, there's no rule book, and even if there was,
Right.
it's different for everyone. So it's like,
Yes.
I think, like you said, the people that don't show up, that's the hardest, because it's like, at least turn up and say, "I'm so sorry, I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sorry for your
Mm-hmm.
loss." That's so much better than just ignoring someone for a year and then be like, "Oh, hi. Oh,
Yes.
oh yeah, we haven't spoken because I ignored you when you lost your baby and that was too uncomfortable for me." Like, just say, like,
Right.
"I'm really sorry, that's awful. Like, what can I do to support you?" Like,
And
that's
I
enough.
had a woman, I'm not even gonna call her a friend. I had a woman in my life that said she was pregnant during that time, and she said, "I can't be around you right now. This is too much for me." And I was like, "Oh, so we're no longer friends." Like,
Yeah.
that's,
Bye.
yeah, that's, and we're not. It's like, you can't handle me? Cool. Like, this is who I am. So, no.
You can't change it either. It's not
Yeah.
something you can be like, "Oh, well, okay, you don't like my blonde hair, fine, I'll dye it brown." Like, I
Right.
can't change the fact that my child died. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like, fuck
Yep.
you. That
Fuck
kind of
you.
got me angry.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm getting angry on your behalf there. Sorry.
I support it. I support it.
Fuck you, random woman. We don't like you.
Yes.
And then the last one is, what advice do you have for partners, friends, and family to help with grief and loss if somebody's been through infant loss?
I think it kind of goes of what we were just talking about, of like, just
Yeah.
reach out. Even like a text is like super, like, calming and supportive. You don't even have to talk to them face to face of like, "I'm thinking of you." Um I remember we had this like idea planned out of when the baby came, we had these like list of things that people could help us with. And
Hmm.
then when Clementine died, I was like, well, I'm going to kind of do the same thing, but for grief, just because I had a list
Mm.
there. And I was like, okay, we need food. I need someone, like, I wanted someone to go be with my mom. And so I had like a list, and I don't think that is something that is expected of the grieving. In fact, I think the non-grievers often put that on the grievers. And
Yeah.
so like Google, what do I do for my friend that baby died? They have a list that comes up and it's pretty basic. So I think showing up no matter what, whether that's sending a card, sending a text, showing up at the door, just to be like, I see you in this and I still want to be around you, because I was so afraid that like I was going to be like cast out of society or something. And when I gave the space for people to show up, they really did. But that was also me probably wanting to like control the situation, because I sure did love control. I was very into making sure things work in my way, especially after having such a traumatic experience. But like, Google it. There's things out there. There are resources for how to show up. And it's not a big, like, you don't have to go buy them a house or send them on vacation. Like, it can be super, super small.
Yeah. I love that advice. Is there anything else you would like to share from your story, or anything else you would like to sort of end the podcast with, the episode with?
I don't think so. I feel very honored to be able to talk about these kind of conversations because I didn't see a lot of them. Also, particularly with like child loss, I wasn't looking at it because it wasn't in my life yet. But when it is discussed, it is nice to know that we aren't alone in these really big feelings.
Yeah, and I think the fact that people have, like, everybody has a different story.
Yes.
Somebody might relate to you and a bit less with somebody else and a bit more with somebody else. I think it's important to share so many different sides of infant loss. So thank you so much for coming on and being so open and honest and sharing your story. And yeah, it helped me. I'm sure it's helping other
Oh,
people listening as well. So thank you
it.
so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.